Candace Williams, Director of Major Gifts at NatureServe. While we wait a few minutes for everyone to join, I encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat feature. Let us know where you're calling in from and tell us about any special or cool or beautiful migratory species that you've spotted in your backyard recently. Looks like we have some people spotting monarchs in their backyard. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know where you're calling in from and tell us about any migratory species you've spotted in your backyard. We will get started in about 1 minute. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again. I'm Candace Williams, Director of Major Gifts here at NatureServe, and I'm so thrilled to have you all with us today for our annual State of NatureServe webinar. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to say thank you. Whether you're a longtime donor, a new supporter, or simply passionate about protecting biodiversity, your generosity and engagement make everything we do possible. We have an inspiring program planned for you today. This webinar will highlight the impact your generosity has made over the past year and a look ahead at what your support is making possible in 2026, including some very exciting and transformative initiatives and projects on the horizon. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping notes. We will have questions at the end of the presentation. You're welcome to drop your questions at any time into the Q&A feature that's at the bottom of your screen. My colleagues are going to be helping me moderate the chat, and they'll also be sharing some links to important information and resources throughout the session. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, so we will send the recording to all attendees and registrants tomorrow, so you can revisit or share it with others. Okay, we have a fantastic lineup of presenters today. Kicking us off is Ann Bowser, our Chief Executive Officer. Next, you'll hear from Lori Scott, our Executive Director. And finally, we're thrilled to introduce Joshua Daskin, our new Chief Scientist. So once again, I want to thank you for joining us and for all that you do to that make possible through your support. I'm delighted to hand things over to Ann Bowser, our CEO, to get us started.
Thank you for this introduction, Candace, and thank you to everybody who's attending today. I wanted to quickly check if the slides are moving. Okay, perfect. Next one, please. Amazing. Well, whether you have been a donor with us for decades or are newer to NatureServe this year, I wanted to start by grounding the conversation in who we are and what we do. For 51 years now, our mission has been to leverage the power of science, data, and technology to guide biodiversity conservation and stewardship. And we accomplish this mission in partnership with a network of 60 natural heritage programs, Canadian data centers, and other entities across the US and Canada. These programs represent over 1,000 conservation professionals collecting and sharing high quality information with NatureServe. This network is the heart of what we do and a big part of what makes NatureServe so unique in conservation. While reflecting on our mission this year, our executive leadership team set a really exciting 10-year target looking towards the future. That by 2035, more than 90% of public and private sector organizations making land use and conservation decisions in North America will rely on NatureServe data, leading to more sustainable, science-based decisions and measurable improvements in biodiversity outcomes across billions of acres of land. This is inspiring and a great segue into what I would like to talk about today, which is NatureServe's impact. We are a data-driven organization, and one of the easiest ways to talk about what we do is through the numbers. And I just like to highlight 3 of these statistics, which are also published in our most recent annual report today. 31,298 new points of conservation significance. These represent spatially explicit locations of imperiled species and ecosystems that can directly inform management practices. I'm also excited about 2,354 conservation status assessments. Many of NatureServe's partners rely on us to tell them how close species are to extinction, and our ability to do so is reflected in this statistic. Lastly, I'm perhaps most proud of the 3,939 hours of training that we have invested in ourselves and our partners. Educating people on our scientific methodologies and data standards is a necessary condition for ensuring that science and data are used in biodiversity conservation decisions. But numbers aren't everything. So I would like to color in these metrics with a recent story from my own personal experience. Just last month, I had the opportunity to travel down to Texas and attend a series of in-person meetings with Candace, our director of major gifts. While in Texas, we were invited to take a nature walk with the executive director of the Lake Creek Greenway Partnership, a local nonprofit with the mission of protecting our natural world through education and stewardship. This was particularly special to me because the nature that I experienced in the East Central Texas Plains Post Oak Savanna and Woodland, that's the official name of the ecosystem we visited, is very different from the backyards and woods that I walk with my kids here in Alexandria, Virginia. And when I got back to my hotel room the night that we took this walk, I became one of the almost 900,000 tool users that you saw referenced on the previous slide, as I spent my evening looking at our standardized vegetation classifications and our NatureServe Explorer platform to learn more about the unique mix of palmettos and oak trees that we spent our afternoon walking through. As our CEO, one of my goals is for people across the US and Canada to use NatureServe science and data just as I did, namely, to deepen the wonder they feel when experiencing something in nature that is both beautiful and new. The second story that I would like to share today comes from the perspective of a man named Frank Price, who is a scientist in our Florida network program. When botanists in Florida discovered new populations of the rare golden sedge, it was NatureServe's network and data standards that made this breakthrough possible. By connecting field experts across states, verifying specimens through shared methodologies, and mapping populations consistently, the Florida Natural Areas Inventory was able to expand the known range of this federally listed species. This kind of discovery doesn't just add knowledge. It strengthens recovery action, reduces regulatory burdens, and highlights how unique species define the character of their landscapes. None of this would have been possible without the NatureServe network, which provides the common language and scientific rigor needed to turn local observations into lasting conservation impact. I'd also like to highlight 2 partners that help NatureServe meet the impact that we seek. The first is with the Bureau of Land Management. 28% of U.S. land is federally owned, and the Bureau of Land Management administers more land than any other entity in the United States. Our partnership with BLM started in 2003. We worked together on conservation assessments for plants, which helped BLM identify which species were most important to protect on the land that they steward. 2 decades later, BLM has also funded our science through projects including pollinator assessments and a model for Western monarch population. Through this work, we were able to show that the local places that are vital to spring and fall migrations often fall on private land. Specifically, 85% of spring and 72% of fall habitat is stewarded by private landowners. This provided the information that BLM needed to find and work with these local property owners to form public-private partnerships that prevent this incredible species from going extinct. These conservation actions were made possible by NatureServe's data on where the monarch is likely to be during critical migration moments. A second important partnership is with another nonprofit, the National Parks Conservation Association. We love our beautiful maps, so let's get oriented to the visual on this slide. The Chuckwalla landscape spans just over 10,000 square miles, centered around the newly established Chuckwalla National Monument, which is located in Southern California. That is the green area on the map at the right. This region encompasses many important areas, including Joshua Tree National Park, which some of you may have visited, several wildlife refuges, and a wide range of culturally significant lands that hold deep meaning for Indigenous communities. This landscape is also a critical place for biodiversity, supporting habitat for countless species, many of which are at high risk of extinction. Although the Chuckwalla National Monument was only designated in January of 2025, there's already concern that it could be downsized. So NatureServe partnered with MPCA to conduct analysis on the current national monument and a second proposed monument nearby. This map shows that both places provide critical habitat, that's the purple, for the Mojave Desert tortoise, an Endangered Species Act listed species. We were also able to provide scientific evidence that this region functions as a climate corridor. NatureServe doesn't advocate directly, but NPCA and their partners can use this analysis to build coalitions that ensure the valuable ecosystems in the Chuckwalla National Monument remain protected, and to push for the proposed Quantston National Monument to be similarly designated. Our science and data provide an important facet to these and similar conversations that wouldn't exist without NatureServe. And this leads me to thanking you all for the wonderful work that we're able to do. I'd like to take a few seconds to recognize our institutional partners and also the wonderful individual donors who make contributions to our annual unrestricted fund. Your support is truly critical to our success. Finally, we like to share information because we believe that transparency leads to trust. In fiscal year 24, which is the last year of our fully audited financials, most of our revenue came from grants, contracts, and program fees, though charitable contributions formed a significant component of that year's budget as well. Thank you all again. Our biggest bucket of expenses is, of course, programmatic activities. And because of the importance of our mission, these expenses slightly exceeded our revenue for fiscal year 24. Many of you may be wondering about what has happened more recently. About a year and a half ago, our leadership team recommitted to finding the right sustainable funding model for NatureServe and to decrease reliance on our endowment. Specifically, we committed to growing our philanthropic contributions and diversifying our earned revenue, including to reduce reliance on federal funding. I'm happy to say that we were able to reduce our endowment draw by 75% between fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25. And despite some loss of federal funding, we are already starting to see some growth in the proportion of revenue that comes from corporate and NGO partners. So, while we acknowledge that it will be a bumpy ride for us and certainly for other conservation nonprofits, we believe in our resilience. And we have every expectation that the changes we are making will take us through this period and the next 50 years to come. But before we go into the future with Josh, I'd like to hand it over to Lori to share a few programmatic highlights from 2025.
Thank you, Anne, and thanks to everyone who has taken time to join us today. I'm Lori Scott. I'm the Executive Director at NatureServe, and what that means is I lead our core program areas of data, science, and technology. And I'm excited to share a few highlights of the impacts we delivered so far this year, recognizing that our teams have been involved in many more activities than there is time to share today. So I want to encourage you to reach out if there's anything you hear or don't hear today that you want to discuss in more detail. So I'm going to start us off with this highlight from the spring. There's been a lot of talk in the chat today about migrating monarchs. We did a study in March of a comprehensive study of pollinators in North America. This study assessed the extinction risk of nearly 1,600 species of native pollinators. And these include recognizable groups, bees, butterflies, birds, and bats, as well as many flies and beetles. The headline result of this study is that 22% of pollinators are at elevated risk of extinction, with bees faring the worst, having 35% of that group of native bees we assessed showing they are at risk. So NatureServe studies conservation status of all species, but pollinators are especially critical. Two of the reasons I want to highlight are that they pollinate about a third of our crops. So that's a contribution of over $15 billion a year, billion with a B, to the agricultural economy of North America. They also pollinate around 80% of other flowering plants. So that provides habitat for other animals, as well as just making the world more beautiful. The study also highlighted some geographic hotspots, including the American Southwest, where we see high pollinator diversity combined with significant climate-related and human-driven stressors. The study was led by NatureServe's lead zoologist, Dr. Tara Cornelisi, and it's recognized as the most comprehensive picture yet of pollinator crisis in North America. NatureServe's conservation status assessments conducted through comprehensive assessments like these don't just land in a database or sit on a shelf. This information feeds directly into state and federal level conservation designations. For example, in the United States, NatureServe conservation status assessments help state agencies determine which species are designated as of greatest conservation need within their federally mandated state wildlife action plans. Next, I'm going to highlight a major achievement from the summer when NatureServe and its partners completed mapping the ecosystems of the contiguous United States, including adjacent areas in Mexico and Canada shown here. The map provides a detailed representation of different regional ecosystems categorized into groups based on shared vegetation at the level of, shared vegetation and ecological characteristics like climate and soil. So by classifying vegetation at the level of groups, the map highlights the diversity and distribution of plant communities, and it offers insights into ecological patterns and processes. This map and the associated National Vegetation Classification, or NVC, serve as valuable tool for conservation planning, land management, and ecological research. The US NVC is developed through a partnership among NatureServe with the Ecological Society of America and federal partners at U.S. Geological Survey and the U.S. Forest Service. The classification also extends internationally into Canada, and it aligns with the IUCN's global ecosystem types. I want to also point out that NatureServe's ecology team assesses the global conservation status and assigns ranks to these ecosystems. So for example, on the left side of the map, we see called out the coastal western hemlock Sitka spruce rainforest, which is vulnerable or G3. And in the upper right, we're highlighting the central tallgrass prairie, which is assessed as imperiled or G2. So conservation status practitioners who rely on NatureServe data tell us that receiving information at the ecosystem or habitat level is really valuable, sometimes more efficient than data on individual species for guiding their land management activities, especially in efforts to keep common species common. The globally imperiled California vernal pool ecosystem, which happens to be available for adoption through NatureServe's Adopt a Species program, which has now been extended to include ecosystems. That provides habitat for many important species, and we're showing 4 of those here on the right. This year, NatureServe's spatial analysts, ecologists, and species scientists have worked closely together with network experts to advance the development of species habitat relationship data, which we are sharing through NatureServe Explorer to support more effective multi-species land management. That'll be critical in achieving that 10-year goal that Anne highlighted earlier. So now I want to talk about birds, specifically bird habitats. So NatureServe partnered with American Bird Conservancy to launch a new bird habitats watch list for North America. The Habitats Watch List, just released a few weeks ago, identifies the most threatened bird habitats throughout the US and Canada. By knowing the habitats birds depend on, we can then measure the threats to those habitats, and we can target conservation to protect and improve them. The Habitats Watch List pairs bird communities with vegetation-based habitat maps to identify terrestrial, freshwater, and coastal habitats across the US and Canada. Each habitat is scored based on criteria such as the threatened status of the indicator species found, as well as the likelihood of future conversion or climate change impacts. So there are 13 of the habitats that are considered most threatened and are on the red watch list. And some of those are being shown in this slide animation that gives you a view of how this application works. Okay, so I started the 2025 highlight reel talking about pollinators, and I'm going to close by bringing us down to earth and down to fungi. So I'm really excited to share that for the first time in our 50-year history, NatureServe has launched a mycology program, and it's being led by Dr. Jessica Allen, who's shown here, and thanks to generous funding from the Band Foundation. Fungi and lichen represent a vast group of species, but they're not well described. Some of the statistics are kind of staggering. They're shown on the middle of the slide here. And the charts show how few of these species have up-to-date assessments in our database. The dark red here means that we have not yet ranked the species. There's many reasons why fungal conservation is important, including the critical ecosystem functions they provide, like decomposition and nutrient cycling. They also support plant health, and they provide food and medicine for humans. Just a few notable examples would be penicillin, lovastatin, and citric acid. So how will NatureServe's mycology program make a difference? Well, it's going to build and support a North American network of fungal conservationists. It's going to serve as a resource for expertise. It's going to develop and refine methods for generating actionable data on at-risk fungi. And it's going to advance our knowledge of the extinction risk faced by species. So going to tick up those orange and yellow boxes on those charts so we start to have more of these species described and assessed and understood. So that's, again, a whirlwind tour of a few highlights from 2025, and I'm really excited to now turn it over to Josh for looking ahead at some of the really exciting initiatives for 2026 and beyond. Thank you for your time.
Very good. Good afternoon. Good morning still to folks out on the West Coast. I'm Josh Daskin, NatureServe's new chief scientist, as folks mentioned. Laurie and Ann have done a great job of teeing up some of our highlights from the past year and the sort of status of the organization. I'm going to do a little bit of an effort to look ahead to some of the big things that we have planned and that I'm excited to start up with our great staff of scientists here at NatureServe in the next year or two. So uh, all the work that you've heard about today really points to the three fundamental questions that we try to answer here at NatureServe. What is it, where is it, and how is it doing? What is it refers to the taxonomy. That's the names for species and classifications for ecosystems. Being able to answer that question is foundational to really all of conservation science and certainly everything that we do at NatureServe. If you don't know what something is, you can't figure out how to conserve it. But this is not always simple, and so we have some of the real experts in taxonomy of plants, animals, and now fungi in-house at NatureServe. We answer the question of where is it by working together to sort of share that information on documented locations of species and ecosystems, over 1 million known locations of these at-risk species and ecosystems across the US and Canada that have come into our databases over the years from the natural heritage programs and other sources, some of which I'll talk about in the coming slides. That allows us to predict where imperiled species or ecosystems might be and help steer conservation actions and other land management opportunities to those places. We assess how these species and ecosystems are doing using a standard, rigorous set of methods developed over decades that consider factors like the population size of rare species, the threats that face species and ecosystems. So that could be invasive species, development, habitat loss, climate change, as well as population size species or the range size trends for ecosystems. So how widespread are these things? Collectively, this is the information that is required for effective management at many different scales, whether local or nationwide or international even. We use many of the partnerships, some of which you've heard about today, with academic, NGO, agency, federal, state, and local governments to make sure that our work matters to the individual places, species, and ecosystems on the ground, and that when land management and conservation questions are asked at the national scale, we're there to help inform the solutions. It's our ability to work with all these partners, again, academic, agency, NGO, as well as certainly our 60 natural heritage programs that enable us to put together statistics like these, answering that question of what is it, where is it, and how is it doing. So in our biodiversity in focus report released in 2024, we were able to highlight that about a third of plant species in the US and about 40% of animal species and ecosystems across the country are at risk of extinction or extirpation. Our understanding of the biodiversity crisis really echoes what others are concerned about and what they're writing about, and we provide the information to find solutions. So as Laurie and Ann mentioned, I'm relatively new at NatureServe. I've been here about 6 months, and I wanted to give you just a quick flavor of why I was excited to join NatureServe. First of all, NatureServe has a national or international even, US and Canada scale of impact, but we try to have local implications. So although our over 1 million locations of rare species and ecosystems that I mentioned cover that whole area, we work closely with all of these partners, internal to our network and external, to find solutions. We focus on biodiversity and especially biodiversity science first. So as a scientist, the thing that gets me excited the most is when science is used for great conservation impacts. And we have an attitude of talking to everyone. All of those partners I mentioned, in addition to corporate biodiversity actors, conservation actors, that's critical in a world where many different types of organizations and people are impacting biodiversity. The ceiling on what a network of 1,000 biodiversity scientists across the US and Canada can do is also really exciting. I have been humbled learning about the volume of data, work, and impact that has occurred at NatureServe over the last 50 years since I joined 6 months ago. I have had the fortunate opportunity to meet members of the network at events in Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina, and most recently, our Western Heritage Programs meeting, where representatives of almost every single state west of the Mississippi were present. And I feel very lucky for this post and hope to make some big things happen for NatureServe and conservation in the years to come. Some of the things I've learned about that are particularly inspiring are the development of that national vegetation classification since the 1990s. That provides consistency in how agencies across governments, local, state, and federal, especially federal agencies, talk about and label ecosystems. Rankings for over 100,000 species and ecosystems conservation statuses. That's an incredible data set to steward with incredible impact across the US and Canada. We are also assisting others with conservation planning, like the National Parks Conservation Association that Anne mentioned, and that another map from the National Parks Landscapes Project here for the Smoky Mountains in the southeastern US is shown. Looking forward, it's also sort of interesting to think about that I'm fortunate to have joined NatureServe at a pivotal time for the organization and in the context of global biodiversity science. So when we were founded back in 1975 as part of the Nature Conservancy before splitting out of that organization, NatureServe and the data that we collect were really the first biodiversity network for the US and Canada. Our information informed conservation planning in multiple organizations and was part of an emerging and then eventually maturing environmental ethic. A lot of conservation at the time was focused on rare species and ecosystems. If we fast forward today to 2025, the situation is a little bit different in some ways. We are awash in a sea of biodiversity data, I like to say. That includes not just NatureServe's great data, but also large citizen science initiatives like eBird and iNaturalist, GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, and others that you may be familiar with. These new data sources and the many, many, many people who contribute to them are actually an opportunity for NatureServe to use new technology and the power of citizen science to update our own data and make sure that we're in line with changes to how conservation is happening. So whereas in our early decades, again, maybe rare species and places dominated the conversation, they still have a place today for sure, but conservation is really quite multidisciplinary now with lots of interest and discussion around the ecosystem services, the things that people get from ecosystems alongside biodiversity. So we want to be, and we consider ourselves to be today, hopefully the science leaders that help decide how those decisions for conservation of biodiversity, of ecosystems function is made. As just one example of the volume of opportunity that some of these new data sources provide, there are 50,000 new records added to iNaturalist every single day. That is, I would say, much more so an opportunity than a challenge to what we do at NatureServe. In parallel, remote sensing tools and big technology is also advancing fast in the conservation science world. Today, we can sense ecosystems at sub-meter, I should say, resolution, sometimes down to individual single-digit centimeters. We can track animal movements on very fine scales, like these owls depicted in the bottom right. And we can even count some large species from space. So going forward, in order to leverage some of these new technological and citizen science opportunities, and other changes to the conservation world, NatureServe is focused on 4 cornerstones. And I'll walk you through these, what they mean, starting in the top left and going around clockwise. So modern mapping, monitoring, and modeling of biodiversity. This refers to a lot of our core work, the taxonomy, the naming of ecosystems, the mapping of ecosystems and species, and the conservation status assessments that lead to our well-known G1 through G5 rankings. It also refers to the opportunity to use new technology, like the development of real-time data pipelines from field biologists across the network into our databases using things like Survey 123 that you may be familiar with, and also to the emerging use of artificial intelligence to speed and expand our ranking and modeling work to keep pace with changes to the conservation landscape and threats to many of the species and ecosystems we track. Clear integrated product ecosystem refers to some of the efforts to diversify our revenue streams that Anne described on the financial slide you saw a few minutes ago. So we have a new team, Revenue and Partnerships, that is focused in particular on the corporate sector, but also especially on differentiating and communicating the use cases for a variety of different products that we offer, from NatureServe Explorer that's free and open to the public, to licensing our biodiversity data in large scales, to individual corporate or agency users. I'll mention a new tool we're especially excited about, Insight by NatureServe, coming up in just a few slides, so stay tuned for that. Inclusive, engaged, and sustainable conservation network, our third cornerstone, refers, of course, to our continued engagement with and support of the Natural Heritage Programs network across the US and Canada. It also refers to sort of network with a little n, which is all of the external networks like key biodiversity areas, like the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, and engagement with traditional ecological knowledge and tribal networks, all of which can help us learn about biodiversity, but also provide opportunities for putting our data and science to good use. Finally, and the one that I'm going to spend most of the rest of my time on today, is flagship science initiatives. So these are organization-wide efforts that we are developing as umbrellas for supporting the science that we want to do, keeping our core data up to date, but wrapped in kind of impact-oriented outcomes, if you will. We want to source taxonomic, so that could be types of species like pollinators, geographic, so that would be regional, and/or thematic, that could be invasive species, could be climate change, topics that our partners want to see conservation solutions for, and that we feel our science is particularly well suited to help address. I will take you through two of these initiatives and what they might look like in coming years to help support our science and find conservation solutions. The first of the two that I'll talk about, we've named the National Biodiversity Monitoring Pipeline. And our data, which I've already spoken a little bit about today, comes from these 60 natural heritage programs. It includes over 100,000 species and 7,000 ecosystems that are assessed. And there are a lot of strengths to this data set. It is comprehensive in its coverage geographically and taxonomically. It is the accepted federal standard in many agencies. It is used for national and international certifications like the Sustainable Forestry Initiative's certification of biodiversity-friendly forests. It is expert-backed by those 1,000 biodiversity scientists in our network, and it's collected and analyzed using standard definitions. We also have some challenges, just like any national scale data set. It's not always the easiest or friendliest to access or share, in part because these data are owned by 60 different heritage programs across the US and Canada. We have been very focused as well on rare species. That is in our mission, and it is not that's not going away. But there is emerging information that some of the largest declines in species are actually for the most common ones, especially in the case of birds and insects. So how do we start to source the information for those species that we haven't focused on as clearly in the past? Well, I'll redirect back to what I mentioned a few slides ago. We have the opportunity to modernize our data collection and databasing solutions with remote sensing and citizen science. So this pipeline that we are working on would move from the sensing of habitat condition using satellite imagery and other remotely sensed information to identify the species and the ecosystems whose condition has changed most dramatically since those locations were originally collected, and then steer those species and ecosystems most in need of updating to field biologists, both in our network, professionals, and to a set of expert vetted citizen scientists. Overall, that would allow us in the coming years, hopefully, to update over those over 1 million element occurrences, the locations of rare species and ecosystems. It will take us time to build out this pipeline, but it could revolutionize the way we operate. And we have begun seeking funding from both NASA and nonprofit sectors on both the remote sensing and the citizen science pieces of this plan. The second initiative I'll mention is comes from NatureServe's increasing interest in regional to local impacts, which we know is what motivates many of you to care about conservation. What you see in your backyard is how you experience nature. That's true not just for our wonderful donors, but for people across the US and Canada and the world. So we are initially focusing on the Southeast, where we already have active projects in sustainable forestry and with the National Park Service, where there is significant land conservation energy, and where I personally have experience on place-based conservation working in the state of Florida. Our aim in this initiative is to be the lead science organization for an ambitious, partner-driven, large landscape conservation vision, where we can address all of these topics on the first bullet point: habitat connectivity, which is the ability for species and ecosystem functions to flow from one place to another; climate adaptation for people and nature; rare species and ecosystems, of course; land use planning, aquatic resources; recreation and agriculture. All of these things will motivate funding for our partners' conservation visions. And that's the catalyzed land conservation part here. So we again have started seeking funding from both NGO and agency sources, operating in the two main habitat types or ecoregions: coastal plain in the eastern part of the Southeast, and the Appalachians in the mountains. We hope that this will be a model for place-based work in other landscapes where our science can similarly provide solutions for big, ambitious conservation visions, and we hope you'll stay tuned for what's coming in the future. More broadly, we are reinvesting in a model of science that relies from the outset of projects, from the very beginning, on understanding our partners and our science users' needs and goals. If we don't understand who the audience is, if we don't understand which science and data will advance their goals, we will not be as effective as we seek to be. So all of the initiatives, all of the projects that we work on are now beginning with these explicit questions: who is the audience, what is their goal, and what science is needed? This is an explicit recognition that in some cases, conservation will be moved forwards by financial or political or social activities, and we want to be working in the places where we can have the greatest impact. Partly this is about interpreting and not just providing our data. So I'll give you two examples of how this is already underway. On the right here is an executive summary from a report on what we are terming unique landscape features. This is a collaboration with several large forestry companies, as well as users or consumers, I should say, of forestry products, and the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, where we are using our data to identify easily recognized features on the landscape that foresters and land managers supplying some of the world's biggest corporate forestry companies can use to identify where biodiversity should be most paid attention to, the areas that perhaps shouldn't be harvested or that should be managed in slightly different ways. So Ricky White and Regan Smythe, two of our wonderful staff members, have collected a set of stakeholders from across the forestry sector, and they have been informing our work and helping us shape how we interact with the forestry sector. Secondly, on the left is a snapshot of the tool I mentioned earlier, Insight by NatureServe, which will launch in the next couple of weeks. It's very exciting. This is a custom site assessment tool where people can provide us with a polygon, a shapefile, an area of interest, and receive an instant detailed reporting on extinction risk, on risk to ecosystems, and the condition of ecosystems in their area of interest, and then compared to both state and national levels so that they can make decisions in the context of both local and national biodiversity. In order to do that co-production work, that understanding of users' needs, before designing this tool, NatureServe engaged in a series of interviews with corporate sustainability leaders, and so our tool is designed specifically for their needs. We are primed for success in doing this work because we have that network of local actors and local experts throughout the US and Canada, because we have decades of experience in our scientific and programs staff who know our data, who know our databases, and we have a committed expert staff who care about biodiversity, and because we have support from all of you Thank you very much for attending today and for the support you provide us. It enables everything we talked about today and everything we see in the future for NatureServe and for biodiversity across the whole realm of places that we work. So I'll just say thank you again. And if anything you heard today is exciting or interesting or you have questions, please do be in touch. I will kick it back over to Candace to help close us out.
Okay, thank you so much, Josh, Anne, and Lori. These conversations always bring me an immense sense of pride to be a part of this organization. I hope you found it inspiring as I did. Before we open it up for questions, I want to take a moment to share a few ways you can continue to help NatureServe make an even greater impact. Next slide, please. So first, I'd like to recognize our incredible board of directors, many of whom are on this call. Their leadership and generosity make so much of our success possible. We are also looking to expand our board in the year ahead. So if you know someone who might be passionate about biodiversity and eager to help guide NatureServe's mission, I'd love to connect with you after the webinar. Next slide. Next, please stay connected with us. Follow NatureServe on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Twitter, all the social media channels to see stories from our network and ways that your support is making a difference every day. And finally, as we enter the biggest giving season of the year, I want to express my deepest gratitude for your generosity and invite you to consider NatureServe in your year-end giving. There are so many meaningful ways that you can give that create a lasting impact, from non-cash gifts like stocks or donor-advised funds to symbolic gifts like adopting a species, which makes a wonderful holiday gift. Now, we'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to send in your questions. Everyone's questions are important. We have about 13 minutes to answer them. If we don't get to yours today, we promise to follow up afterward. So, Lori, I'm going to throw the first question to you from one of our attendees. They say, congratulations on the significant progress with the NVC groups. Can you share information about how complete are the conservation status assessments for groups, and how close are you to completing ranking for NVC groups?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I checked with our team, and there's 457 groups, and of those there are 67 not yet ranked. So that's about 15% remaining. And those are a priority for getting provisional ranks assigned. Dr. Patrick McIntyre is our Director of Ecology, and he and his team are planning to review and update all the group ranks and ensure that they're all up to date with the standardized process for ranking using our latest tools, like the rank calculator. So almost there.
Great, thank you. Okay, Josh, next question is for you. Do you believe that the habitat or ecosystem assessments are repeatable in ways that can show change over time, perhaps to evaluate impacts from climate change?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we are extremely interested in developing increasing ways to track conservation statuses over time, both for the species and ecosystem level and at the individual level of those element occurrences, those places where we know rare species and ecosystems occur. There has been work in the past on what can and can't be done from looking at the trend in the G1 through G5 rankings. There's a lot of nuance there about what level of information was known at the first time point versus the second time point. So sometimes you can do it credibly, and sometimes the change in status really reflects the change in level of information that was available at the time of the ranking. Would be happy to dive into the details if folks, if whoever asked the question has further comments or questions about that later on, but we probably don't have time for getting really into the nitty-gritty on that here.
Great, thank you. Okay, and next question is for you. Is NatureServe no longer active in Latin America and the Caribbean?
That's a great question. Thank you. We are not active in Latin America and the Caribbean. We are really centering on our work in the US and Canada for a couple of reasons. The most significant one is the strength of the network here. We have 60 programs in the US and Canada that have been working together for decades. And while we experimented with trying to help stand up something similar in Latin America or the Caribbean, we weren't ultimately able to match the strength of what we have in the US and Canada. So we decided to keep our focus on where we are thriving the most.
Great. Okay, Josh, next question for you. Given the enormous advances in remote sensing for monitoring, are any natural heritage programs or is NatureServe working to revisit elemental occurrences through high resolution remote sensing so we know more about their contemporary status?
Absolutely. So that question is a perfect lead-in again to the National Biodiversity Monitoring Pipeline that we hope to develop in the next couple of years. There are a couple of natural heritage programs. I know Oregon in particular has been looking into using remote sensing more and more, and we want to use it for exactly what this question gets at. Can we identify the element occurrences, the places where those rare species and ecosystems are known to exist, that have seen the most change in habitat condition? Then we probably need to punt it to field biologists, whether professional or citizen science, to go and check those high priority locations, make sure what we're seeing on the remote sensing matches what's on the ground, make sure we're interpreting it, and perhaps train models so that we don't have to visit every one of them on the ground. So yes, your question is exactly the direction that we are starting to go and that some network programs have just begun exploring.
Okay, and next question. Planning for the 2026 annual International City Nature Challenge is beginning now. Would NatureServe support the creation of eco-regional based projects as opposed to those solely based on artificial man-made boundaries?
So I used to follow the City Nature Challenge. It's not something that NatureServe has been directly involved in, although if I'm remembering the same City Nature Challenge that you're referencing, which goes through iNaturalist, some of our state-based natural heritage programs do incorporate iNaturalist data into the work that they do and have different workflows that they have developed for validating the information further and then sharing it with NatureServe accordingly. I personally, as an occasional citizen or community science volunteer, would love to contribute to something that's based on ecoregions.
Wonderful. Okay, Lori, can you tell us more about how NatureServe's tools help protect ecosystems?
Oh, sure. So I highlighted earlier in the 2025 highlights how we have produced this National Vegetation Classification Group Map, and we were just answering a question about how we've assessed the status of those groups. I mentioned in that how we're hearing a lot from practitioners that this habitat scale data is just really critical for them. It's a more accessible entry point for a lot of land managers to apply our information and to help them meet their goals. And Josh also gave an example of a product we're developing in concert with Sustainable Forestry Initiative and forestry companies called Unique Landscape Features. So there's many examples of this. Really, we focus on all scales of biodiversity. You know, we're doing species level, fungi, as well as plants and animals and ecosystems, because it's a multi-tiered system, and all facets of biodiversity are important. Nature Explorer, the tool that's our most well-known and most well-accessed tool, is providing that data at the species and the ecosystem level. with the basic biological information, the mapped information, the what is it, the where is it, and the how is it doing, the status. And so that really together as a whole package is what we see as important for practitioners to meet them where they are, to give them the information that's practical to apply, grounded in science, and able to move the direction that they need to go. The other example that I highlighted, the bird habitat watch list, is a great example where working with American Bird Conservancy, we helped bring our data together with theirs to get it into the hands of people to understand, okay, I'm worried about this bird. What can I do about it? Well, it turns out this habitat on which it depends is at risk. So it shines a light on those really threatened bird habitats to help drive conservation action to those places.
Okay, Anne, last question for you. What are you most excited about for the next year of NatureServe?
That is a fun one. So our current strategic plan runs from 2022 to 2025, and I'm sorry, 2026, and we are starting a new strategic planning cycle. So this is an opportunity to take a lot of the ideas that Josh shared, build on them, refine them, write them down, share them with people to get excited, and then also reflect on our strategic role in the biodiversity conservation landscape and identify some of the partnerships that we want to build on to take us forward far into the future. And that's a collaborative process, as always. So we're excited to work with our board and the network and many others throughout that journey.
Wonderful. Well, that's all the questions we have today. I encourage you to reach out directly to any of the panelists. Their email addresses are on the screen if you have any questions or curiosity about a specific topic. So on behalf of everyone at NatureServe, thank you again for being part of our community. Your support has made 2025 such an impactful year, and we cannot wait to show you what's ahead in 2026. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for all that you do to help nature thrive.